Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we are going to start off with walking the fairways as always, looking at the weather itself, particularly on the eastern side of Australia. Bit of changes there that's happening. Great stuff for the courses that don't have a good water supply. We'll be talking a little bit about that. Looking at a development that has fallen over, which was looking pretty promising, but sadly is not going to be happening, which involved Greg Norman. I'm going to touch on some work happening in WA under one of the design companies that have been doing a little bit of work over there. A few golf courses down in Melbourne that have been busy during lockdown, and also a golf course in Sydney that looks to be cut in half. And then we're going to move on to a bit of golf chat with friend of the podcast and friend of mine in Melbourne, Ross Flanagan, who is a podcast legend across the world. No doubt you've heard him from the My Love of Golf podcast. Now, I've been interested in catching up with Ross, and we recorded this little conversation just the other day. So was really excited to catch up with Roscoe and chat all sorts of different things about golf. I hope you enjoy the chat with him a little bit later on. And looking at the Greenkeeper shed, talking about irrigation and what that does to the presentation of a golf course. Come on, guys, let's hit Walking the Fairways. Walking the Fairways, 3rd of November, 2020. As mentioned, we'll start walking the fairways by looking up in the sky and the weather that's been happening around the place. And I mentioned there a couple of episodes ago that La Nina was going to be was forecast by the Bureau of Meteorology, which La Nina brings above average rainfall to the eastern parts of Australia. And that is really starting to kick in. It has been over the last sort of month or so in central western New South Wales and the southern parts of New South Wales into northern Victoria and so on. And it's really starting to kick off at the moment. We're having big rainfall totals continue to accumulate through the central west, the southern coast, the southwestern New South Wales, down into central Victoria, and now really firing up in southeastern Queensland. And it's really, really starting to, and even into the northern parts of New South Wales, northern tableland. So really starting to see a lot of regional golf courses will now see their dams starting to fill up, lots of runoff with temperatures now really warming up through late spring, and water starting to really accumulate totals through the soil now. There's good moisture content. Golf courses are going to have grass hopefully jumping out of their skin. And as we start to ease in towards the end of the year, total contrast to last year, which was devastating on many fronts. And this year looks like we're going to have some really, really good quality presentation out there from a lot of golf courses which haven't been able to fight the drought of the last couple of years. And now we've finally got a bit of a turn in that weather. I've mentioned in the past these sorts of the rain cycles that come about with La Nina are around sort of 7 to 10 years. And it's been pretty close to that sort of 7-year mark, 8-year mark since we had floods and high rainfall totals west of the Great Divide in many parts of New South Wales and southeastern Queensland and also central Victoria. So really good things if you're doing a bit of travel regionally. And I know I've spoken to a number of people that are doing it that haven't done it for a long time, traveling regionally throughout New South Wales, especially because I know a lot of that area, and people are really enjoying this. They're planning it. They're looking forward to it. They're playing courses. I've spoken to plenty of people. They're playing courses that they haven't seen before. They're really enjoying seeing some of these different types of golf courses, lesser known golf courses, and just enjoying golf and different scenery, different people, catching up with country people, and the hospitality that comes from that. So that's why I was doing the golf travel segment, just to get you out there and some of my recommendations. You're going to go and play all sorts of different courses around as you travel and move. Now that Victorians are allowed to move within their state, the metro people, albeit a little bit in metropolitan Melbourne, but people are now starting to be able to move around and within their states. And now there's a little bit more interstate travel starting to open up very loosely. In Queensland, for example, now the border's open to regional New South Wales residents, so anywhere except metropolitan Sydney, you're allowed to travel across that border into Queensland. So if you like, and obviously Queensland people are allowed to come down across the border into New South Wales without any concerns of a quarantine period in heading home back across the border. So look, there's things are starting to change. Things are starting to happen. Part of that's the weather. A little bit of that's from COVID restrictions easing in states. But we're really happy to see some of these rains coming down as the temperatures start to warm up and golf courses really start to show off their stripes, literally. Moving into Oxley Golf Club, which is in the southwest of Brisbane City itself. Now, I've seen a little bit of information coming from Oxley, and this is part of some of the courses taking time at this time of the year just to do a few little rebuilds and bits and pieces. They've been rebuilding and resurfacing their 16th tee, and they've put down wintergreen couch on that tee surface there, which will make a really nice tight surface for people as you see that grow in and start to mature. Certainly over the next couple of months, specifically because of the warmer conditions, it's going to really tighten up, give it a really, really good playing surface. So that's something that Oxley have been up to. If you know that course, if you've played that course, if you're a regular there or a member there, you'll notice the work that's been going on there on their 16th. And they've also turfed out the carry area, what we call the carry area, on the 18th hole. Now that's carry area is the tee to the fairway that you carry with your drive, hence why it's called the carry. Now they've resurfaced that and turfed that out, basically just to cover up. It's an area that's often neglected, basically left to its own devices. Usually irrigation's not in those regions. We concentrate irrigation in areas of high maintenance, being regularly mown, regularly trafficked with play, and the carry area is often left out. But sometimes they get really bad. They dry out in periods of drought. It gets lots of traffic from carts and concentrated traffic from walking from the tee to the fairway. So they get a bit hammered, as it were, and they can get bare areas creeping in. You get a lot of tree root issues as well in those areas as well. But look, the 18th at Oxley, they've covered that over. They've returfed that out, so they've got a good grass cover again, no doubt for presentation, but also it's balls that are mishit and that sort of stuff. You can get hammered with really horrible lies and things like that. And that's an area that they identified they wanted to repair. Their membership decided and the club decided that they wanted to improve that, so they've rebuilt that and turfed it over for good presentation. They've also, in recent months, I think it was only in August, that they'd rebuilt the greenside bunkers on the 7th hole as well. So they've been busy at Oxley, moving forward, right time of the year. People are starting to get out and play golf a little bit more. And now that Queensland's opened up to regional New South Wales travellers, they might see some people visiting Oxley as well to play golf. So that's what's been happening up there. Huntley Golf or Huntley Heritage. You may have heard these two names over the last few years. You may or may not, but it was a golf course development that, like I said, was previously known as Huntley Heritage. That's how I know it. It was being developed in the Wollongong area south of Sydney. So obviously we're in New South Wales, at a place called Avondale, which is West Dapto. Now, if you know that area south of Sydney, I know it a little bit, not very extensively. This Huntley Golf, or Huntley Heritage as it was known, was part of a large-scale development that was going to happen in this area at Avondale. It was a housing development around a golf course, a resort, day spa. The 18-hole golf course that was resort course that was pegged to be built there was a Greg Norman design. I remember, I think it was only last year, might have 12 or 18 months ago, that was on the news that Norman flew in his chopper to announce that he was doing the design. They wanted to push with these new owners that had not so long ago had taken control of it from another previous developer. They got the big fanfare and the big name, and Norman flew in and said, "This is what's happening. My name's going to be part of it. It's going to be a great facility." There was also going to be a high-performance golf centre. They wanted to be a big development area in golf, and certainly a performance base for golf in New South Wales is what their goal was. I remember reading up about that also. It was going to be developing an old disused coal mine site. And this particular site was at the base of this beautiful escarpment. If you know the South Coast, it's pushed right up against the base of the escarpment, which is sort of, it's got the sandstone cliff feel of the Blue Mountains. It's absolutely beautiful down there. And to use an old mine, disused site, a neglected site, a way of rehabilitating these areas, and Magenta Shores is a classic you may or may not know, was an old disused rubbish tip there along the beach, and now it's a beautiful Magenta Shores golf course and resort. Well, this is the sort of thing when I love to see golf course developments rehabilitate lost areas, wasteland areas, areas that have been sort of neglected over time, and have, once they're finished, their commercial value is gone. It's good to be able to rehabilitate with something beautiful like this, and certainly obviously housing. And it's an area that had been targeted for a population expansion in that region, so there was obviously lots of housing and stuff going on in there, and that's all key part of these developments happening. But it has completely fallen over after years of working through with council, and it was and local owners in the area, and because obviously lots of people struggle with change and high density living and that sort of stuff. If they're paddocks and farmlands and all those sorts of things, which are in that West Dapto area near the escarpment as large scale properties and not dense housing. So they worked through a lot of this stuff, but the company that owned the site went into liquidation and it all fell apart. Now that didn't include Greg Norman and his companies involved, and Greg Norman Design and so on, weren't financially involved from what I've read in the development itself. They were just attached to it with the design, so they weren't financially part of it. The owners obviously would have engaged them to do the design and so on, but like I said, all completely gone, sadly, and now that site is up for sale. And knowing how difficult it was for the previous owners to work through council, it could be a very difficult exercise to pick up and continue on with. I got to know a little bit about this project while I was working at Katoomba Golf Club, because the developers that we actually spoke to the previous owners of this property back when it was Huntley Heritage, and what they were looking to do. And we were certainly looking at some of the stuff that they were looking at on course, what they were going to build, how they were going to build, all those sorts of things as we look to do new ways of construction and things like that as well. It's always good to sort of see what the latest and greatest is, and that's what they were about to embark on. Many times over, it changed hands, fell apart, and like I said, it's all completely gone. So west of Dapto there in the Wollongong area, Huntley Heritage sits quiet and dormant again. That old coal mine site is going to sit stagnant for a little while longer. Cobram Barooga Golf Resort down on the Murray. I've mentioned this in my golf travel segment. Now, their old course is having some changes done to it. It's a 36-hole facility. The old course and the west course they have. The old course is having some changes done by Contour Golf. Now, I've mentioned this design firm in the past. They've done plenty of work around the place, and they are working down at Cobram. Now, they're looking to do some changes of the course. They're going to be changing their hole numbering, and obviously, basically, that means they're routing a little bit in the way that you work your way around the course, because they want to have the start and finish, be it the 1st and the 18th, around what is the Sporties Club. Now, that's at the southeastern corner of the property. That's part of the amalgamated Cobram Barooga Golf and Sporties Club. So that's where the bowling greens are, or were. It's like the old bowling club. They've rejuvenated that facility. They're going to have the golf course start and finish there, be it the old course. And Contour Golf are rebuilding the 18th green. They're moving a little bit shorter, rejigging around that area of the Sporties Club there. And with the 18th green comes a rebuilding of the 6th tee. So if you go down to Cobram in the next 6 months, as you know, you start to travel a little bit more, we get a little bit more out there, you'll see that there's some work going on down there. And some of this stuff looks really, really good. New bunkers, it's a whole new green and a whole new tee complex for the 6th. So as how that golf course will now finish on the 18th, it's going to be a new green facility, slight changes to the hole, but they're keeping busy down there at Cobram with Contour Golf. Now, I'll stick with Contour Golf because they're also working, and just a little bit of a bounce around here, but Contour Golf are working at Kwinana Golf Club at Callista over in Perth, in the outer reaches of the suburbs of Perth in WA. Now, Callista's about 35 minutes south of the city centre itself, and Contour Golf they're redesigning some of the greenside bunkers on the left of the 9th hole, which is there were these really large featureless bunkers around the green on the left, big, flat, round, wide things that just had no style, no flair. And what they're doing is reducing the size slightly, but going to bring in some of that design flair, some of that style, some of those aesthetics that we love to see out on the course. It just grabs your attention, grabs your eyes, builds interest visually into what you're looking at and what you're playing around as you get around the golf course. And they've targeted their 9th there at Kwinana. So that's what's happening. Contour Golf, busy all over the country. So this is obviously they're a design firm that'll work sort of east or west, anywhere in between, doesn't matter. And they're certainly keeping very, very busy. The ninth at Kwinana is a par 5. And get this, and I'm going to say Kwinana because it could be Kwinana, could be some of the pronunciations of those suburbs in Perth can be quite difficult if you're not a local. I'm far from, but I do love Perth, having visited over there once before, and it's a beautiful part of the country with some incredible golf. But at Kwinana, the ninth is a par 5 to finish the front 9, over 500 metres long. Now, that's a hell of a golf hole to finish your front. And the ninth green sits you play it up towards the clubhouse, and it sits just more or less is the more predominant green outside the clubhouse views, with the 19th green sort of adjacent to it as well, but the 18th green, adjacent to it. The 9th green is really the main one that you see outside the clubhouse. So I'm just going to throw out there that they've probably selected these areas to do because it's viewed from both sides, be it when you arrive to the club, milling outside the clubhouse, heading off to the first tee when you're starting your round. Also there when you're in the clubhouse looking out, whether you be dining, drinking, socialising and so on out there as well. And obviously to play the hole, any areas on golf courses, and we certainly did at Katoomba, you try and pick what you can get the most bang for your buck. So if you can target areas that are key areas that you want to repair and improve on the golf course, but also areas that add aesthetic value from the clubhouse, you're usually going to pick them first because you're getting a double-sided hit, which is always sort of why we did it. That's why a lot of places will pick those particular areas to improve first because you're getting more bang for buck. But like I said, the 9th is outside the clubhouse, and that's what's happening with Contour Golf there over at Kwinana in WA. So a little bit of work happening there. Back to New South Wales, where we had previously talked about the Cobram Barooga, but in New South Wales and obviously Huntley Heritage. So we'll stick with New South Wales a little bit longer. And Tallwoods Golf Resort. Now, you probably heard me talk about in a previous podcast episode, I'm a huge fan of Tallwoods since visiting there a few months ago. Can't wait to get back, honestly. Really, really excited about just Tallwoods in general. And the new owners that I've mentioned that have been there now for a couple of years, they're starting to really invest in the property and invest in the golf course and trying to make it a destination golf again, because there are a few other big names up in the north coast of New South Wales that you want to visit that have got a much larger name in terms of quality of course. It's got more destination, more people going there, and it's much more widely talked about. And some of those places I talk about, like Bonneville, for example. But Tallwoods is starting to work really hard on getting your attention. They really, really are. These new owners are working really, really hard. A family-based company, and they're out of Sydney, and they really want to make Tallwoods something special again, which I'm so delighted to hear. And just some of the stuff that's going on, they're sticking to their word, and they're doing more and more work. They've been returfing the red tee on the 11th, as they do have a really good a group membership of ladies around Tallwoods that play regularly. And that's one of the tees that was identified there to improve. The other one is the 17th blue tee. I'm a huge fan of the 17th. Absolutely mind-blowing tee shot, and I'm glad to see that the blue tee is being repaired and returfed. They've also been purchasing some new golf course equipment, which is what we want to see as well, to make sure that they're able to keep doing and keep the course up to a great standard. Things like a bunker machine to have better maintenance on the bunkers, keep them more consistent for you, and a new utility vehicle for the golf course so that they can get around and do the bits and pieces that have got to be done. There's always work happening on a golf course, and you need good gear to keep maintaining it at a high standard. So 10 points for Tallwoods. They are sticking to their word and continuing to improve the place. Still in New South Wales, and we head to the city of Sydney, where at the top of the podcast, I mentioned there was a golf course that was going to get cut in half. That golf course is Moore Park. Now, sadly, and I say sadly from a golf point of view, sadly on the 27th of October, I'm pretty sure it was the 27th, could have been the 28th, but thereabouts, there was a council meeting for Sydney City, and it was voted that they wanted to cut Moore Park in half down to 9 holes. Now, you've got to understand that Moore Park is a council land. It's on council land, so they've decided, the Sydney City Council, under the direction from the mayor of the mayor being Clover Moore, that they want to cut Moore Park from 18 holes down to 9. And I've talked about this in the past. It was shot down. It's been shot down a number of times, and they'd obviously not taken this vote on earlier this year because they didn't have the numbers. Finally got themselves sorted, went to a vote, got it voted in, and it's gone through. Now, that was only just recently, like I said, not that long ago, and it will be interesting to see how this pans out, because they've talked about, Clover Moore especially, have talked about wanting to open up that space to more people, not just golfers. They believe that having a golf course of that size on council land, specifically only for golfers, is not the best use of that green space. So they want to cut it down to 9. Their argument is that golf is dwindling, and they don't believe that space is warranted anymore for 18 holes. So they want to open it up for the general public. And look, they want to keep 9 holes and the driving range, I do believe. They've recently rebuilt the driving range over the last few years, and it's a great facility now. But to cut that down to 9 will be pretty interesting. There's a couple of plans out as to which end they remove from golf and bring down to 9 holes, but that's obviously the detail that they'll now work through and try and work towards when this is going to actually happen. Now, I probably struggle a little bit because their argument is that they need more green space for people. So there's been a lot of high density, large scale unit blocks built around that southern end of Sydney City in recent years, and I think that's probably where they're coming from. But they're saying that there's not enough green space around in the city of Sydney. Now, I find that a little bit hard to get my head around, because literally down the street from Moore Park Golf Club is Centennial Park. If you don't know Sydney that well, Centennial Park is around about 150 hectares. I think that's a guesstimate from memory, from what I can recall reading. 150 hectares across a couple of parkland spaces, which creates Centennial Park. It is not a small space. I've been there, enjoyed it with my wife, with friends, for a wedding, all sorts of different things. It is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful parkland in Sydney, and it is so bloody enormous. Honestly, I've never seen it full. I know that sounds stupid to say full. It's not. I don't mean physically full with people standing shoulder to shoulder, but lots of people use it. Lots of people enjoy it. It is absolutely enormous. And it's a wonderful space. But to sit there and say that 9 holes is going to make a big difference on the space, the open space for people to use, I think is a crock. And I don't agree with this decision. That's my personal view. But it will be interesting to see how this pans out. A lot of the things that have been brought up like this have been shot down in the past. And I mentioned Marrickville. I've mentioned Warringah in the past. We've talked about Albert Park down in Melbourne. All these things have been brought up in the past by different councils. They've all been shot down. This one's been voted through. It will be interesting to see how it's going to pan out over the next sort of few months and years, what sort of upheaval there'll be, what sort of petitions there'll be from golfers and from people who enjoy the game to try and keep Moore Park. And Moore Park's, it is an old golf course as well. So it's got a lot of history. It's a well-known golf course. It's probably the nicest full public access golf course closest to the city of Sydney. And that says a lot, because it allows people to get into the sport. That's why they rebuilt their driving range, to again give people an opportunity to get into the sport a little bit. It's a great 18-hole golf course with great history, good walking track, towered over by the city itself. And it's going to be sad to see it go if that's the way it ends up. But one to watch to see when they start to put dates together for things to happen. And I, for one, hope that it doesn't go through, but it's been voted through by council for the moment. Now we move to Melbourne, because things have changed in Melbourne. As I mentioned, there's been an easing of their COVID lockdown restrictions, which is great to see Melburnians start to be able to enjoy the sport again, to get out there, albeit with limited distance movement. and limited numbers, and that's changing regularly at the moment down in Melbourne. Started off with groups of 2. Now it's gone, I think it's going to, or it's just gone to groups of 4. People are allowed to get out and start to get into retail a little bit more. So you have some of your golf retail stores opening up as well, which is great to see. People getting back into the sport, and I think there's a new appreciation for it down there in Melbourne, particularly where they've been locked out for, I don't know how many weeks now. It's been crazy. But I talk a bit more about this with Ross Flanagan in my golf chat segment coming up shortly. So we'll delve into that a little bit more. But some work. This lockdown has given golf courses an unusual amount of time with no traffic to do work. So because you're still allowed to go to work, greenkeepers and golf clubs have earmarked certain jobs to be done, which has been great. So some of the lesser-known courses like Warburton Golf Club, which is in the upper reaches of the Yarra River to the northeast of Melbourne, they've returfed their 9th tee. Now, getting into these, I've talked a lot about returfing tees, rebuilding tees. It's great to see this stuff happening because tees are such a high-use area. And obviously we know greens are, but tees are somewhere that you still want quality surfaces. You still want them to be nice and level. You still want them to be smooth. You still want good finish. You still want good quality turf surfaces to play golf on. It's a key. It's a high area of golf. Even though you're not putting along the ground of it, you still want to be able to play and start each hole on a great starting space. So it's good to see golf courses ticking these over, and usually they're long forgotten. Usually they're not rebuilt for like 40 years or, it's ridiculous how long you really try and maintain them and keep them going. So they are left on the back burner forever and a day. And it's good to see them slowly starting to tick these off in all these courses. So Warburton's one, great looking golf course down there on the Yarra. And their 9th tee, which they've rebuilt, resurfaced, returfed, which has also included new irrigation on the tee itself, which is great to see. So a smaller club, get out there, go to it. If you're able to, go and visit Warburton. It looks like a great golf course as well. It's certainly one that I'll be putting on my list when I get to go into Melbourne again one day, whenever that is allowed to happen. So that's what they've been up to there. We'll jump to Heidelberg Golf Club, which is on the banks of the Plenty River, which is it flows into the Yarra. It's at a township or a suburb called Lower Plenty, which is again northeast of Melbourne City. It's not as far out of town as Warburton, but it's in the city limits. They've also been busy in lockdown with a new 8th tee complex, and that's included a new path which runs from the 7th green around the back and down the side, the 8th tee, and then gets you on down towards the fairway. And they've also, in rebuilding that tee and resurfacing it, they've also realigned it, because quite often you'll find as courses age, as they grow, as tree lines grow and they become wider and start to impinge on fairway lines and your hitting lines from the tee. Some of the tees and over time, fairways change. There could be bunkers in place and so on that adjust where you want to get your aim to down the hole to start the hole. You'll find that tees often are not where they're now wanting you to play golf. So it's a subconscious thing. It's usually an old thing. Sometimes it works on purpose to adjust people to, for example, along a boundary. You'll have a tee aimed away from the boundary further than the actual hole itself, just to get people subconsciously to aim further away. These are old things that you'll leave alone, for example, if you don't have to do a lot of changes to the boundary holes on an older golf course. But where you can, we try and adjust the alignment of tees. It makes life a little bit easier when you just stand over the ball and align yourself. You naturally align yourself with the length that the tee is positioned. So it's often a design thing that's never really fixed very much. And like I said, there's pluses and minuses to how it's done. But down at Heidelberg, they've hit their 8th tee and they've incorporated a new path around that 7th green 8th tee complex. Now we bounce down to Tassie. There's been some images doing the rounds of Arm End Golf Course. Now Arm End, ARM, Arm End, 2 words, Arm End in Tassie. Now it's being done by Craft and Mogford from Golf Strategies. Full new golf course down at Hobart. It's one to keep an eye on. I've talked about it, but now they've just released some images that are showing you the hole numberings and where they are going to run, and the routing is laid out on the peninsula that is Arm End Golf Course. It's a multi-use space. So it's not just for golf. There's going to be lots of things incorporated into this area. Public access golf course, great new facility being done. And some of these aerial images that are coming out with the hole numberings will just give you a little taste of the layout. Now, I've said it in the past that this golf course is going to be fantastic. And now you really get a sense of just how those holes are going to flow around the land. I'll see if I can get some of these images and put them up for you on my social media pages, just to give you another little taste, a little teaser that Crafter and Mogford have done. So if you follow their pages, you'll probably have seen, but I will see what I can do to get them out there for you as well. And it just shows you some of the routings and how it's going to sit. It's just an incredible piece of ground that probably you wouldn't think you'd see a golf course on, but I'm glad they're going to be able to do it in the right way. And they're looking to, it's a conservation area as well. So this is the way that golf courses are going. They're doing things differently, doing them more beneficial for the environment as well as the area. A bit of conservation happening in the way of trying to build a golf course as well to retain the space as green space. And I think this is going to, it's a modern way in Australia of building golf courses, and I think it's going to be the better way of doing it in the future with multi-purpose use space. So it's not just only for golf. Yeah, arm end, like I said, this one's good. Keep an eye on it. And that's walking the fairways, guys. Let's get into golf chat with Ross Flanagan. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to a golf chat segment. This one had this guest on in the past, Ross Flanagan you may know him from My Love of Golf podcast, from the Mental Mastery, from Golf Rules Questions. Ross Flanagan, welcome again to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. How you going, mate?
Steve, I'm really good. Thank you for that introduction. Geez, I was about to say, that guy's on a lot of podcasts.
Mate, you can add this one as a guest on top of it, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. You're a bit of a podcast wizard now, mate.
Well, I enjoy having a chat, as you know, Steve. It's one of my strong points is having a chat, and I do that on a daily basis. I get to chat golf every day, so it's just part of what I do, and I just enjoy the format of podcasting. I enjoy talking to people about golf. Enjoy talking to interesting people about interesting topics. So it really does fit in well with how I like to roll, Steve. So thanks for connecting and having another chat. It's been good to see you. Good to see you back into the podcasting. The babies.
Yes.
Congratulations on that. And that was.
Yeah. No. Thanks, mate. It was a little bit of a break, obviously, while we were fortunate enough to give birth to our little baby girl. So getting back into the swing of it with, trying to get back on the podcast and get back in the groove is great fun. I love doing it, and just to try and give people bits of information and where they can, and love having people like yourself on board. So, mate, thank you for coming back. And the world's a different place. More so again for probably you guys being Melburnians and Victorians than say for myself in New South Wales and some other states of the country. How has life been in Victoria in this sort of a serious lockdown? Because we all look from the outside in and we're going, geez, wow, but what was it? The best part of 12 weeks or so? I can't, 8, 10 weeks? How long was lockdown for in a serious level for you guys where there was no golf allowed?
It was August the 6th I think, that it went into what we call the stage 4 lockdown here in Melbourne, which meant that, basically all forms of sport were cancelled. All forms of public gatherings were cancelled, including golf. All forms of, retail businesses other than essential services, supermarkets and things like that were shut. So, me being involved in the Drummond Golf world as a franchisee of one of the stores in Melbourne, we had essentially our business closed for that time up until yesterday. So yesterday was a fairly significant day for retailers, cafes, and other businesses, pubs, and so on and so forth in Melbourne, because we were allowed to open our doors for the first time. Retail is we've all got limits on how many people we can have in the store and things like that, and there's a whole heap of other restrictions for cafes and outdoor dinings and how many people you can and can't be in, all of that sort of thing. But you know what? It was just a great feeling yesterday to be able to open the doors for the store, not have to sort of stop people at the front of the store, and serve them at a counter, click and collect environment, which was awkward, but welcome people in and and get them, seeing and touching and feeling and talking about golf, because we know in Melbourne that golf has been going absolutely cocoa bananas in places like New South Wales, Queensland, basically all Australia. And so it's just good to be able to start, riding a bit of that wave. And there's so many great new golf products that have come out in that time. That's one of the things with the business sort of being closed. One of the things that kept us busy, because we had to go and unpack boxes every day, because all the manufacturers just kept sending this new product, which has been great. But yeah, everyone says, "Oh, your online business must have been booming," but I think every online business during this time has boomed, whether you're in New South Wales or Victoria. But Drum & Golf have a very good online web store and website, so they handle that on behalf of all of the stores in Australia. And so we were just there for click and collect. People wanted to come and pick up something because they needed it, whatever, or we needed to post it or whatever. So we did all of that. So no, but Steve, it's the thing that I mentioned yesterday to someone is it really has made us all appreciate what golf means to us, and how valuable it is in our life today, in our week to week, outside of working in the golf industry, but just as golfers and players, and what level of enjoyment we get out of it. That's probably been the big thing that we've all had a nice realignment and been forced to remember what golf means. So that's been really nice.
And I agree with you, mate. I think there's certainly that new level of appreciation, and we certainly are in New South Wales. We're hearing about people that have got back into the game, people that have had a break and come back, people that are wanting to get into the game because it's one of the few things that you're allowed to do during lockdown, and they're experiencing new things and in the sport itself, and new levels of camaraderie and friendship and socialising to a certain extent. Obviously, I'm not talking about big groups and that sort of stuff, but it's become this different level of appreciation of enjoying the outdoors, and I think possibly more for yourself being in an extended lockdown down there, that to just be able to be outside, not necessarily the golf, but the fact that you can now get back out there and be outside, you're almost like seeing the environment for the first time again, smelling the fresh air for the first time again, without dramatising it too much. That's sort of kind of how it became when we're allowed back out. And I think everyone's really seen this positive take on being allowed outside to play that sport and just get around there. And like golf is always a personal challenge as much as it's an enjoyable pastime. And I think we've fell back in love with the sport rather than it being something that we just catch up with people on a regular basis, whether it be weekly, fortnightly, whatever it might be. So, I
was just going to say, Steve, you get reminded of that fact when, and this isn't not to politicise anything, and everyone's got their own opinions and on what happened and the controls, and golf is safe and it should have been able to be played all the time and whatever. So let's not talk about the rules and what they were and weren't. But when you do get forced to only be allowed out of your house for an hour,
that's tough.
A day, with one other person from your house to exercise, and then when you drive in the gates, and very, very fortunate for me to be able to drive in the gates at Peninsula Kingswood as I did. I've only been to the golf course once since, because I've been pretty busy getting everything ready. But when I got the chance to drive into Peninsula Kingswood and just see the course in the pristine condition and just go out there by myself, I just went out there by myself and played sort of 4 or 5 holes and had a putt and had a chip on the course. It was exactly everything you just described. It was really nice. It was really great to be just out there being on a golf course.
No,
good. It was really good.
No, it's I'm sure it's been a delayed reaction to you guys being able to do it down there, and I think you're probably appreciating it more than others have. And like I said, we've been able to enjoy it for a lot longer. But mate, look, let's move away from the lockdown. Sorry.
Well, can I just give a shout out to a couple of special?
Absolutely.
Have missed their golf in Melbourne, very, very much so. And I just want to give a very special shout out to Jerome Hughes, Christian Welsh, Cameron Munster from the Melbourne Storm. Those guys missed their golf tremendously, but I think for us Melburnians it was worth it, eh? Out of Storm.
Come on, mate. Come on. It's still
I just had to get that in.
I'm a Western Sydney boy, and it's still a bit raw with the Panthers going down, mate.
We might have been locked down, but we still won the NRL premiership. So well done to those boys. Massive golfers, Munster, Welshie, and Jerome, and a couple other boys from the Storm. But I know those guys. I miss their golf, but yeah.
Oh, look, and you know what? A shout out to anyone who's been able to achieve any of these sorts of things in this year that was, whether it be like, so proud that we're able to have a healthy baby, whether you're a sports fan, you can follow. There's all sorts of stuff that people have sort of had to work through this adversity in the year that was. And lots of people are achieving things they probably never thought they could or would or, might happen, that strangely enough have turned out that way. And for Melbourne as a city and the sporting teams that come from there to hold both championship cups, as it were, for both of our biggest sporting competitions in Australia, be it AFL and NRL, I think that's a huge deal. And I think, no one's done it harder than Melbourne. And, I think it's wonderful. And certainly, it's a big thing. And I think for a bit of positivity, just for the city, I know what it's like when your city wins. Like when the Swans won, my wife's a mad Swans fan and I am too. When the Swans won the premiership, I think it was 2012, it's just a big deal. Like, you feel so proud. And I think, sure, for an NRL side, the Storm, they're such an incredible organisation and a sporting team. To do it this year in NRL is incredible. And for the Tigers to do it in AFL is just spectacular. So I think for Melbourne to do it is great to see from that side of it. And I'm sure it's a bit of a buzz for the city to sit back at home and be forced, in a sense, to watch the seasons. Would be a hell of a lot of good stuff coming out of it. So, yeah, big shout out to those guys. They can get out and play golf now too. So,
once they get off the beers.
That's right. We get past Mad Monday, which I think they've done now. So, but mate, look, like I said, let's get away from the COVID side of stuff. It has been difficult. We're all aware of that. And you talked about, from a retail sense, being in the drum and golf world that you are in the city there, that all the suppliers, there's been new equipment coming out. There's been these sorts of things happening in the golf equipment side that people haven't been able to see. You mentioned in a store, you like to see, touch, feel. We like to see all these bits and pieces. And when it's click and collect, it's more just the usables and the things you're going to turn over. I imagine golf balls and those sorts of things that people would do the click and collect for, rather than a new driver that's come out. I mean, I'm seeing my Instagram feeds and Facebook feeds have been plastered with all the companies bringing out new gear in a COVID year. What are some of this stuff? I say Callaway or TaylorMades or Mizuno's or whatever. What are these guys coming out for? I'm sure it wasn't that long ago that there was a new Callaway and that there was a new TaylorMade. How can they be bringing another thing out? To me, it's a little bit like mobile phones. You buy the latest and greatest, and then 6 months later, there's something new. How can it be that much better?
Well, it's a pretty competitive space, across all the brands. Everyone, the big golf brands are, fighting for the hearts and minds and golf bags of the golf consumer. And, it's a technology-driven game. Everyone's looking for an edge. Everyone's looking for a way to get more distance, more straightness, more height, more something. People are looking for something more out of their golf equipment all the time. And, and that really does appeal to us as golfers, as wanting to improve.
Yeah.
So, everyone as a consumer is on a cycle. Some people jump from new product to new product very quickly, but most people have a set of clubs, and then they'll look for that level of improvement. Their game's improved or sometimes regressed, and they need some more help and support. So, the manufacturers are really trying to make stuff to suit all the varieties and variations of golfers in the market. Now, they tend to have to do it a little bit quicker, because just technology advances and everyone else is advancing. So it just, for me, and this is just a personal opinion, this is not any qualification from anyone's told me this, but just they've always got to be competing.
Yeah, okay.
And that form of competing for them is to make a new product. Now, in a product sense and a brand sense, they get onto life cycles. So when I worked at Mercedes-Benz, the cars had longer life cycles. You'd have a new C-Class and it'd be 7 years. Now in golf, some brands have a 12-month life cycle for their new driver. An example of that would be the tailor-made sim product. It's
Yep.
it's a sort of, let's just round it off to 12 months. So there'll be a new sim type version driver early next year.
Yeah, right.
Some other manufacturers have longer life cycles. Like, so Titleist has like an 18-month cadence. So there's obviously a new Titleist TSI2 and TSI3 just about to launch in November. So it's been sort of maybe 18 months, let's say 2 years in round numbers. But they've had that. Ping usually has that sort of 16, 18-month life cycle for their driver. So everyone sort of has a different cadence. Callaway has a 12-month life cycle. So they've got, well, now 3, but they had 2 drivers. They had the Maverick family and the Epic Flash family. So one year they bring out the Epic Flash, and then the next year they bring out the Maverick. And then,
Yeah, okay.
So they've got a new driver every year, but the drivers are on two-year life cycle.
Right.
Introduced a new one, the GB21. They bought the Great Big Bertha bag. So there's a whole heap of machinations on new product, but essentially, they survive on building new clubs that are going to make you go straighter, further, faster, longer, and so on and so forth. And you know what? It's fun being part of that, because you're never not trying a new golf club, and you're never not comparing and testing and all that sort of thing. It's a lot of fun. But I can see from the consumer mindset how sometimes that can be a little bit can appear to be a bit daunting or overwhelming. Staying in touch with all of that technology and all of the changes, and there are a lot of changes. You're bombarded.
Oh, look, totally you are. And I'll use me as an example, because it wasn't that long ago. And I laugh because I think it is now in golf equipment terms. But I was looking at the M4 TaylorMade driver, and when they were released, and I think Dustin was using them, DJ and that sort of stuff, some of the big tour players on TV. And I was like, wow, geez, I tell you what, it's about time I updated from, wait for it, my R7 TaylorMade. But
well, that's an example of, you're sort of, I guess, a little bit more traditional. You've had your R7.
Yeah.
I couldn't count how many drivers I've had in my bag since the R7. I had 2 R7s. I had the R7 and the R7 425 TP.
Yeah, right.
Which was probably still one of my all-time unicorn drivers, that one. I don't know why I still don't have it, but I don't keep it for posterity. I know I don't have it in the bag, but I love that driver. But, you had the R7, then you went to the M4, and now it might be time to look for something else. And, you would come into the Sim family on a TaylorMade and find the new fit for you in that one. And it might be something else, but, that would be the progression.
Yeah.
Some people change more frequently. They change every time there's a new driver. They've got to change to the next one. Or, they're searching for improvement. So sometimes people just fall out of love. It's a little bit like a relationship, they fall out of love sometimes, and they've got to get into a new relationship to, regain the confidence and regain their, refine that sort of golf game that they're missing. And sometimes that just means they stop a relationship with one club and have to move into the new club, and relationships sometimes don't go too long.
Interesting analogy, and I think it's very pertinent, because it is a bit like that. Like for me, it's my revolving door of putters, because obviously it's the putter that's the issue. It's not the person on the end of the stick. So that's the way I justify my putting. But it's very much when you get to a point in your golfing skill level where you're confident and you're scoring okay, it doesn't matter what your handicap is, that you feel comfortable and your game is at a level where you go, okay, you know what, I'm still improving, but now I'm starting to feel more together with it. One thing drops off, whatever that one thing is, which for me, it's usually putting, and it's from a lack of golf, but I'll fall out of love with the stick and I'll just go, it's a confidence thing. I've got no confidence standing over the ball. There's nothing wrong with the club. I know that it's me, but if I then find something that just feels right and you just look at it and you go, you know what, this is the shiny new toy I've been looking for. And for whatever reason, on the synthetic green in the Drum and Golf Shop, I'm nailing him from everywhere. And I go, you know what, this is it. This is the one. And then it's a love relationship where when you fall out of it, and everyone's got different time frames when it happens, and it does, you do have to kind of move on. It's very hard to get that confidence level back, I find.
Well, mate, as we said, there are some people that just do that, and thankfully for golf shops there are people like that. But there are some people that don't do that, and they really do wait till there's some very definitive advantage that they can find in upgrading. Because let's face it, they're not getting cheaper. We're talking drivers now in the vicinity of, $800 to $900 in, that sort of sphere. Not all, but let's say generally that the new ones are in that space for the big brands. You can certainly go, the price points lower than that for different brands, and sometimes they're just as good and perform just as well for different players. So, that the value of testing and being able to go to a store like mine where I've got, pretty much most drivers, every driver has a demo, every loft is a demo, every variety is a demo, maybe not every single one. But, you can come into me and test those drivers without plastic on them, test the different shafts, and we put a lot of value in that fitting process and really trying to, give people the confidence that when they do get fitted for a driver, use driver, or irons or whatever club, but, let's use the driver. When they do get that, we've given them the opportunity to improve. We've shown them and be able to demonstrate that their old one with their current swing was, this result, and that result might be going to the right too often, a bit too much slice, bit too much spin, bit too much launch, bit too much loft. So, all things that sacrifice distance. And then we might be able to find them a new driver. And using your example, from the M4 or the R7, that has new technology, which is designed to improve a lot of those things, or help improve a lot of those things, without really having to spend a lot of time going through mechanics. A lot of people, just don't want to put the time and investment into the mechanics, i.e. lessons. Yeah. So, they can find equipment that that can help. So the new Great Big Bertha GB21, it's a draw bias driver in the main. Very high MOI, very high MOI, very high MOI stands for moment of inertia. So that's the forgiveness factor. And it's built in with a little bit of a draw bias. So if that person, comes in and they have that slice and they're just wanting a bit of help to straighten it up, now a driver alone doesn't straighten bias. It doesn't, I say this a lot to people, it doesn't turn a 15-yard fade or slice into a 12-yard beautiful draw, but it helps mitigate it. And if we can find the other factors that are contributing towards this loss of distance or loss of straightness, like getting the right, most appropriate shaft, so many different shafts and shaft weights and shaft flexes and kick points and so on and so forth. And, the tech heads will know what I'm talking about, and the ones that aren't can go and research it. But, getting the right shaft through a fitting process is really important. And that has a massive impact on distance. They can, through reducing spin or, reducing undesirable ball flights, undesirable launch conditions and so on and so forth. It can have a massive impact on that. So, when the technology does change quickly, you get access to that. And these incremental little changes can make a difference to a lot of golfers. Like 3, 4, 5 more fairways around, can equate to a couple of shots. And, if you said to someone that, you make a change in your equipment, it's going to save you a shot to a couple of shots around over, 6 months period, you add that up, you depending on the level of golf you are, you take that, wouldn't you? So,
absolutely.
A long way of saying, the value of getting fitted and the technology does help. And there are clubs that are designed to help. That R7 that you had, if you look at that now and put that down beside the Sim Max, for example, or the Sim, different shape, so much bigger. You can see where the forgiveness is and wasn't. The twist face technology in that Sim tailor-made driver is designed to help the ball that comes off the heel. Otherwise, in the R7 would be like a heel cut. It's designed to help the ball come back to the middle more so. The big toe draw, the face slopes away from the direction of play and pushes the ball to the right. So the toe draw ends up more in the middle rather than starting on line and ending up in the left of the fairway for the right hand. So much stuff going on.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot in the detail, isn't it? Where they've that's where all those little extra things help, and you get to see that when you go to your local club and your local professional. If you go to a drum and golf store or wherever it is, your local golf shop, whatever it might be, and certainly for a place like yours, I know which I've been to, where like you said, the biggest thing I love in these modern day golf stores, like your drum and golf one, is that you've got the facilities, like you mentioned, to try it out. It's not just look at it, feel it, have a half a swing in the aisle. You can actually have a red hot go next to yours side by side, next to your own gear, and see the real difference.
I would always encourage, and where we try to encourage people to bring their own club, so we can really demonstrate the benefits of something, making an investment in something new.
100%.
Yeah, I'm in Franklin Street in the city, right? So obviously I don't have a driving range there. I don't have any of that I can get access to. But what I do have is a whole truckload of technology, as in a full swing golf simulator, 4 of them, and the GC launch monitor. So, I've got a couple of different measuring devices, and those things really just, help a good fitter understand, what changes to make. It's like a doctor, putting their stethoscope on your chest and having a listen and poking the stick on your tongue and having a look down there and going, okay, you need to try that.
Yep.
And that's what we do in a fitting sense. We get the numbers, we have a look at the spin, we have a look at the launch, we have a look at the ball speed, we have a look at the swing characteristics and the shot shape and all of that. And we look at what they're using, and we're looking at all the different variables and saying, right, let's try this one. We don't always get it right first go, but it might be try this one, then we try this one, and we just try and narrow it down and make the decision really simple, or much simpler than it was, and just basically focusing on the needs of the customer. But that's what we do in a fitting, and we've got great technology to be able to do it. It's comfortable, it's fun.
Exactly, mate. I think that
the stimulator of fun is fun, right?
Mate, it is, and you can belt the living bejesus out of it, which I love doing, and just seeing what does and doesn't happen. And look, all these things make you as a player better, and you certainly get the latest and greatest stuff which you can measure against what you have. It's easier to do that. You can get all the details in real time, and I just think there's a wonderful additions in commercial space of golf which are fantastic. And look, I want to use what we've just talked about a little bit and bounce to something a little bit of current as well, and I'm going to throw to it, and it's much to my frustration sometimes, and I'm going to talk about the Bryson effect on consumer golf. And I think Bryson's with Cobra, I think is his driver or his gear or something. I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong. But all I hear about at the moment is Bryson this, Bryson that. He's great on television. He's one of these. He's a personality which I think golf has missed for a long time. Whether you love him or hate him, and I'm probably on the other side of the love, to be honest. I'm a little bit on the other side, but I think he's a character for golf, and he's becoming a draw card. He's creating his own brand. In the process, he's getting this following that's just a wave. And I say the Bryson effect on consumer golf, he talks about, the length of his driver shafts. And I've heard your man Rocket on your podcast talk about the physicist, or what's his nickname for him?
The fake physicist, or the fraudulent.
Yeah, the fraudulent physicist. But that's Bryson. That's who he is, and that's how he goes about his game. And he's got the same length shafts on his irons and that sort of stuff. Are you guys in the retail space and in consumer golf? Are people starting to see some of this different way approaching your game, and hearing people? Are people asking, what does Bryson, he's using same length shafts, how does that affect my game? Can I look at something like that? Does any company offer anything like that? I don't know.
Well, to unpack that.
That's a long list. I'm sure.
Just to start unpacking that, the Bryson effect. Yes, does he shift the needle? Does he create eyeballs and awareness on the game of golf? Absolutely. Does he get people talking about golf and talking about different concepts in golf? Absolutely. Is that a positive? Absolutely it is. Of course it is. Whether you're on, as you said, one side or the other, and you subscribe to his theories and very much theories and methods, or not, that's for individuals. You can listen to Rocket, and he does call him the fraudulent physicist, and because sometimes some of the stuff that he chortles on about, it does leave you scratching your head. But you know what? The proof is in the results with Bryson. And
mate, look, at the end of the day, and like I said, I'm not on the love side so much with Bryson, and that's irrelevant. I love what he's done for the sport, but he's a character. He's getting this following, and it's his way of doing things, and everyone's got their own means. And at the end of the day, full stop. When he won, what did he win? The Open? Was it the Open?
US Open.
US Open, of course. I watched it. this guy can play golf. Make no mistake, and I don't pull any punches about it. He can play real golf. He can compete with the best. He goes about it his own way, and we can all commentate on what we think. But at the end of the day, this bloke can play golf. He's a real golfer.
He is a good golfer, and he's an excellent golfer. And he's got a strategy, and he's playing his game to that strategy. And so not many people can play that strategy. And you hear the term bomb and gouge, and you hear the term, the bomb and gouge is the common term that's referred to when you're talking about Bryson, but it's just bomb it as long as you can and get as close as you green, so you can maximize your shortest clubs to get the ball as close to the hole. Now that's a pretty solid way of lowering your golf score for any golfer, to try and get closer to the hole. That's what we're trying to do. So you can hit a wedge, not a 8-iron, or a 6-iron, not a 4-iron. Now, because we know the 6-iron is easier to hit and score with than a 4-iron. So anyone would want to do that, but he's just created this ability through, having a physical strategy for that, through this testing. I had my own theory that whether it's right or wrong will be proven right or wrong in the future times. I think for him to get maximum strength out of his muscles, and I'm not the fitness expert, but I've had Ollie Yawn on the Mile of Golf podcast, and we've dedicated a whole episode to talking about this and his thoughts, because he's a golf strength and conditioning specialist.
Yeah.
But the discussion was, you've got to get big to build muscle and to get strong. Not something that I'm familiar with. So my theory is he getting really big and massive and being able to eat and gorge and eat what he wants, basically, and get a little bit what I've termed fit fat or fat fit.
Yep.
To then build muscle. And then is he going to sort of next year, are we going to see a different Bryson again? Is he going to lean off? But then he maintains this big muscle and strength. So, who knows? That's all theory. But what he's been able to do is hit the ball a bloody long way, incredible amounts of distance. And, his game's benefited. And he's been up there pretty much consistently. He's had a couple of poor results in that time, but the tournaments that he's played in, he's performed pretty well.
Yeah, mate.
The point about, I was going to say about the one-length irons, the people ask about those. Yeah, of course. People come in and ask, what are these clubs that Bryson DeChambeau uses? What are the one-length irons? What's that all about?
So there you go.
They do. It's not a new concept, because Cobra, who he is with from top to toe, so maybe for his putter, it's a sick putter. They're the only ones that currently market a set of one-length irons, and in pretty much all of their model iterations, they have a one-length variant.
Yeah, right, there you go.
It's not for everyone.
No, of course.
It's an interesting concept. And it harks back to, it's not new, like one-length irons hark back to the origins of the games, when there was very little difference in length of clubs. And some players, I can't remember, it might have been Ben Hunt, but some of the former greats have played with single length clubs, but it's not for everyone. I've got a set. I was intrigued, and I bought a set of one length Cobra irons at the start when they first came back out, and that's the same set that Bryson uses, the King forged iron, which the new one's coming out, and I love them. It's the one set of clubs that I've still kept. I don't use them at the moment, but usually, like most people, I cycle through things. If I stop using something, I sell it. But I've kept my one length irons because they still intrigue me.
So
these conversations have come up all the time. The reason I use it, and I go back to it, is because I get a little bit of back soreness. So when my back gets sore and I want to keep playing golf, being able to hit that sort of maximum 7-iron length just makes it easy for me to swing every club in the bag without having to bend over and that sort of thing. So, I don't use them very often. My back's all right, but I can see why people like them. But people are intrigued, and it's a really hard decision for people to go to them.
Yeah.
And I find the people that do go to them have really, studied up on the concept of one length and this whole, same swing for every club, and really thoroughly thought about the benefits to their game of doing that. And the lack of variation between, because hitting a 3-iron and a pitching wedge is a different swing, it's a different plane, because the club's a different length, and so on and so forth. So to be able to consistently do and reduce variables, people see that as one way of better scoring.
Yep.
So, but they're not for everyone. But it's a solid concept, and he's proven it. The thing that people are talking about Bryson and what was brought to everyone's attention is, another topic, another sort of podcast, but the distance of the drivers are able to hit it, and the distance of the ball, and there's a whole other topic on that. And Scott, you talk about the forgiveness of the drivers and how easy it is for the lesser quality ball strikers to hit the current modern day drivers so straight. And that he would say that there are players out there hitting the tee ball further and straighter because of the driver, and someone like him who is the ultimate driving machine, hits it straighter all the time, isn't getting an advantage because other players are getting an advantage of this maximum forgiveness. So he's one that would say, let's reduce the size of the driver head.
Yeah,
people are saying let's roll back the ball, whatever.
Yeah, look, I do agree with you that there's plenty of things that you can argue for and against in the game, and how it's moving and changing in time and distance and accuracy and forgiveness, and look, there's so many moving parts, and the driver is not the only piece of that puzzle. It's a very broad topic, and look, there's probably plenty of people above my pay grade that deal with it in a much more serious sense when we're talking about the rules of the sport. But I think the Bryson effect is an interesting one, and it's certainly got a lot of tongues wagging, especially more so now after the Open win. So, at 10 points for his effort.
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of
didn't happen by accident.
No, exactly. And Rocket had to eat a bit of Bryson humble pie in one episode of the podcast because he was nowhere to be seen when Bryson won. And but anyway, but the true test will be what happens at the Masters.
Indeed, and we're all
in this 48-inch driver and all that. His strategy is obvious. He is just going after maximum length to get as close as he can to those par fives, so he can turn a par five into an eagleable, almost like a par four, and hit it.
And I've said it before, and I say it again, that he's not the only one to do it. There's people in my podcast. I've talked about it. You've got the DJs of the world that monster it. You've had in the past, your Greg Normans and your John Daly's. They've all been there, and we've had these waves of people chasing distance who could hit the ball a mile and be accurate. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch, and certainly the Masters will have a lot of eyes on Bryson and seeing how his different method of attack will come through, and whether it's going to work or not quite work the way that he's hoping. So all eyes on the Masters, I think.
Can't wait for it. It's actually quite, considering where we've been and being starved of golf, it's quite nice to come out of it and have the Masters only a couple of weeks away. So
absolutely, mate. Now, Ross, with all that's been talked about in relation to golf tournaments and golf equipment and things that interest us as we've moved forward, we've come out of COVID and we're getting back into the sport. One thing that I do love, and I have enjoyed listening to during this COVID period, is obviously your podcast, which I do love it, My Love of Golf, and the great people that you've had on, the celebrities, the some of your guests, and obviously you got your regular there in Rocket, and recently talking about the tournament that was at Shadow Creek and Rocket's visit to Shadow Creek and in his time gone by. And mate, how is the My Love of Golf going from your side? It's you still got a good, I suppose, a future attendance list that you're looking at of getting people on board, and you're still loving the topics to talk about and all that sort of thing? How's it going?
It's going really well, and it was one of the things that kept me going through that COVID period, was being able to, do that and to talk to people and to reach out to people and just keep producing some stuff. It was really a positive thing in my life at that time. And how's it going? It's going great. Many episodes, not many, but I've got a number of episodes that have been recorded during that time that are yet to be released. And every day, I talk to someone, there's a new opportunity popped up. I had a great conversation with a young man, a very talented young man in America yesterday. He's doing some great work. So he'll be coming on the podcast. I've got Rue McDonald from the Scottish Golf Podcast to come on. I've got my friend, two-time PGA Tour winner, Gabriel Hertzstedt, to come on, and more. And we're approaching, I think, 98? So I think a couple of episodes off 100 episodes. So they reckon,
that's huge.
They reckon if you get past sort of 9 or 10 in the podcast world, that you're considered a podcaster. So I guess that's it's going okay. But no, I enjoyed chatting to people, mate. We're hearing golf stories, and the biggest vindication for me, Stevie, is my dad, who's up in Cessnock.
Yep.
He would come down and visit us every few months. And when I first started podcasting, he's not a technical person. He might even listen to this. I don't know. I'll put him onto it. But he's not a technical person. And we played him one of the early podcasts, and it was the Megalodon, Justin Sipes, the Megalodon monster truck driver who I met in Melbourne.
Yeah.
He's a monster truck and a mad golfer. Anyway, I thought I was clever because the first intro to the podcast was the Megalodon truck revving. have a listen to this, and the truck revs. He said, "Oh," and his typical stoic Scottish accent. "I don't listen to this. I don't listen to the podcast. I don't know." And I just shut down. I thought, no, he's not interested in the podcast. Yeah, fair enough. Move on. Anyway, now he's ringing me, going, "Oh, I listened to your podcast with such and such and such and such. Oh, it was very good." And so when I've got my dad listening to the podcast, that's enough indication for me that I've done something in my life that's made him happy. So it's a good reason to keep going.
Mate, look, it is, and I know I speak for myself and any of the people that I know that have listened to it and do listen to it regularly. And mate, it's a joy to listen to. We love hearing the stories and the insights and different facets of people that play the game and how they enjoy the game and what they take out of it, and some of the insights that you've got as well from some celebrities and sports stars. And mate, it's really enjoyable. And look, to anyone listening to mine, if you haven't before, please go over to the My Love of Golf podcast and listen to Roscoe and his various guests and regulars that are on board, because it's a great listen. You'll really enjoy it. And, they're good bite-sized podcasts that are easy to digest, and it's really a nice casual way if you need to wind down. I find it really, really calming just to really chill out for an hour or so and listen to some of the guests. You've had some amazing people, I will be honest. So it's great to listen to, and I'm glad it's going well, and you're really still getting that kick out of producing them and putting them out there. And of course, you're on, like I mentioned at the top of the segment, that you're on the Mental Mastery with Jamie Glazier and Golf Rules Questions. Now, mate, you really are a veteran of the of the podcast world.
Well, I enjoy doing it, but I enjoy as much helping people. I guess it's a little bit of my nature with what I do, and when I see great people doing good things, I get gravitated towards them. Much like yourself, Steve. And Jamie and I have been golfing buddies for a couple of years or a few years now, and we talk about golf improvement, and I know, and you talk about using putters and going through them as a crutch for improving your putting. Well, I'm the same, and I realised that at some point, it was the 6 inches between my ears. So I was really sort of intrigued and invested in the work that Jamie does, and I remember the conversation that I had. I said, this is great in a podcast. I'm in the podcasting. Your content will be great in the podcast. I think people will love it. And he said, yeah, okay. And then some period of time thereafter, he came back and said, I think I might start this podcast. Fantastic. Great idea. And he said, oh, but I don't want to do it myself. Can you help me? I said, I'd love to. It was just an absolute, didn't even have to think about it. And, we're 20-odd episodes into the Mental Mastery Golf podcast. Once again, I just love being, A, providing some of the subject matter for that through my own game, B, listening to Jamie talk about some of the scenarios, and then C, some of the great people that we've spoken to on the Mental Mastery Golf podcast, for those that want to, tune into that. Even if you're not into the mental performance game of golf, which I think everyone should be and can be, just some of the guests, talking to Gabby Ruffle. Wow.
Yeah.
Just a privilege to be able to talk to the a future US Open. I'm going to put that prediction out there, but a US amateur winner, just started playing in the pros, not as a pro, but as an amateur, playing the Women's British Open, a couple of American tournaments, and just talking about her journey. And a really significant thing for me was I met Gabby at a time when she was 14 in a golf store when I started my golf journey, and she was playing tennis. And I remember looking in her eyes and seeing a young girl, as I said, why don't you play golf? And she just looked at me back and rolled her eyes, and Ray was there, and she was buying some golf balls for her mum for Mother's Day. But anyway, it turned out to be a really significant time in her tennis career.
Yeah.
Fallen out of love with tennis, and it was at that time. And it just reminded me of that. And wow, what an opportunity. And then we chatted to Gabby's parents, Anna Maria and Ray Ruffles, and both top level tennis players of their era. Ray Ruffles, for people that don't know, coached the Woodies through their many Wimbledon tournament wins. He was a top level doubles player himself, played with Phil Dent and, all the top level. Anna Maria, she was a great player in her own right, a USC Trojan all-time Hall of Famer. So wonderful time to speak to them about parenting and parenting elite athletes, because obviously Gabby and Ryan Ruffles, both unbelievable golfers. We've talked to some of other Jamie's clients, and it's so much fun, so much learning. And then the Golfers Questions podcast, Blakey, another young man who's got just an absolute passion for golf, and he delivers that with golf rules, with this knowledge, savant-like knowledge. He is a savant with golf rules, and once again, I'm just drawn to his ability to be knowledgeable about this area, and I see the people that connect with him talking about golf rules. Now, there's a quick story on that is how I first met Blakey. I was sitting in an airport in Glasgow, Scotland, and I'd been on one of my golf trips over there. I'd been there with the guys from TaylorMade, went to the Open at Troon, and we played some golf. And one of the playing partners, young Lauren from Geelong, he played a ball out of a burn on a par 3 at Dundonald Links, and he hit the side of the burn in his backswing. And I posted the video, and then I was just swarmed with people telling him that he had broken the rules. And at the time, I thought, I didn't really think about it because he played it and the ball went near the hole. But he had broken the rule because weren't allowed to ground your club in the backswing for making a stroke. So all these people started commenting on the rules. And Blakey, back then, this is 2016, was one of the guys that commented. And me thinking, who's this guy, commenting on this video, golf rules questions, and I just pigeonholed him as some, older sort of rules sort of type. But no, it was Blakey, a young fella sitting there in Melbourne who just curates all of this wonderful stuff around golf rules. The video got like 27,000 views just on my Instagram, which is nothing. And it just made me realise that people were really into it. And once again, podcast, Blakey, you should do one. Can you help me? Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So that's all.
No, mate. Look, it's great to hear you've got such a passion for helping people and bringing forms of entertainment through listening to the podcast and all the various ones. So, look, mate, glad to see you're still out there enjoying it, delivering it, and being part of so many different ones and helping people along the way. So, look, to my listeners, if you haven't, My Love of Golf podcast, The Mental Mastery, or Golf Rules Questions, go and listen to any of them, all of them, some of them, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it just as much as I have listening to. Roscoe, as always, mate, I really appreciate your insight into all things golf. It's great to have a discussion about the sport and the bits and pieces that are going on. Thanks for taking time out to be on my podcast, and good to chat as always, mate, and I look forward to catching up. And again, to my listeners, if you're in the city, because Ross is the drum and golf store in the city. Where is it? Fitzroy Street, did you say, mate, in the city, Melbourne?
Franklin Street.
Franklin Street, sorry. So if you're in town, I think it's a great store. I can say it because I can. Go to the shop if you're down that way now that stores are open in Melbourne and people are out there. So if you're listening down that way, get into town, go in and see the store and catch up with, say good day to Roscoe or some of the staff, and they're so friendly down there. I've been fortunate enough to experience that side of it, and it's great. So, mate, thank you again for your time, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to be part of my podcast.
Stevie, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm happy to do anything I can at any time. Whenever you say, it's so easy to do, and I love listening to you talk about your recent episodes, talking about my hometown of Cessnock in the Hunter Valley, and talking about Cypress Lakes and the vintage and all things around there. That's always is going to warm my heart and keep me coming back to your great craft and skill, mate. Thank you very much.
It's a part that I love talking about. So thank you again, Roscoe, mate. Good to catch up, and we will again, no doubt, very, very soon. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Welcome again to the Greenkeeper Shed. Thanks for coming on down to our little facility for a little bit of insight into golf course maintenance. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, this little segment is about golf course irrigation and the relationship that does to presentation of your golf course, what you experience out there when you play. Now, I think a lot of us would now, in modern days, being 2020, forget the COVID year. I think we're all, are starting to. It's nearly an asterisk clause to say that if it wasn't a good year, it's the COVID year. So that's why everything turned to shit. But look, we'll move away from that. When we talk about irrigation, like I said, most people are going to assume now every golf course you go out to is irrigated. They're just going to assume that everywhere is irrigated. Now, as of 2013, 7 years ago, just before the golf course that I was superintendent of, being Katoomba Golf Course, west of Sydney in the Blue Mountains, that golf course that we looked after did not have automatic irrigation. We didn't have a dam to use for irrigation water. We didn't have any stormwater runoff because we didn't have any storage. So what we had was a manual, what I call a manual irrigation system. Now, you will very, very seldom see an old manual system that you have to go around physically and plug hoses and sprinklers in, drag them across the greens and set them up and move them around to irrigate your greens, or alternatively, to stand there and hand water the greens and the surrounds or tees or whatever. You will very, very rarely come across that on any modern golf course. You might still find it on some of the regional country courses that don't have a lot of money, where infrastructure was built back in the day piecemeal as membership allowed to pay for it, as the clubs could afford to do it bits and pieces. But in any metro golf course and any modern day golf course, you'll probably find that it's usually most of the golf course, the playing areas, be it tees, fairways, and greens and surrounds, are irrigated, and they're irrigated automatically. That's what you'll find. And there's so many different computer software systems that control these irrigation systems that do it automatically with rain sensors and moisture reading controllers and all sorts of stuff. And sometimes a lot of the time, I should say, it's controlled and set by the superintendent or the greenkeeping staff. They come up with the best time allocations for the water to be put out on those different areas and to try and maintain them the best. But now we're getting into more automated systems as well. So that you would just expect, we go out on any golf course and we expect that that's what's going on. But I want you to know that that's not always the case. Like I said, that as of 2013, so 7 years ago, my golf course, we were delivering what I would consider was pretty high quality finish, pretty high quality surfaces, pretty high quality presentation on our golf course. But we had a manual system. We had to move hoses and sprinklers around. We had to drag them out every morning. I'd go to work at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m., depending on the time of the year. And, under torchlight in the middle of the night or early morning hours. And I would go around. That was one of my jobs. And all of our staff would take turns. We would go out there and throw the irrigation out, move the sprinklers in the dark with the torch, drive around in the dark. And hopefully every now and then the police would turn up because someone saw a torch out on the golf course. And thankfully we had neighbours watching the course for vandalism. You had to that's what had to be done. There was no other way around it. So some courses have that, but most of them don't. Most of them now are modern day irrigation systems that are set up with computers that will control the irrigation and get water out as required. Now, what that does is it means that we can fight Mother Nature. We can fight against Mother Nature as much as possible with the water that we have stored somewhere, whether it be tanks or dams, or pumped from bores, for example. But we can fight Mother Nature if she doesn't want to give us a nice even delivery of water throughout the growing season or as seasons change to maintain the golf course as best we can. Because everyone wants it to look green. Not often is it left to its own devices. Certainly on greens and surrounds where the highest concentration of golf is played, you could arguably say 50% of golf is played around the greens and surrounds. And that's something that back in the day was all you could do. You only had a plug-in point around a green, you could hand water those areas, or you could put a knocker sprinkler around and water those areas to keep them green. Now we expect the rest of the golf course to be maintained the same level, but it's not always the case. So I look at things like Augusta. Let's go to the top end of the spectrum. Let's look at a place like Augusta because it's coming up. Now, some of you may have read about recently or you've heard about it in the past that Augusta have a regime of setting their golf course up where when it comes into that time of the year, they'll scalp the cooch right down, because the cooch is what the predominant grass type is for the warmer summer periods. They'll scalp it right out. They'll then oversow the golf course from fence to fence with ryegrass, and they've got irrigation everywhere. Of course they do, with what would be a seemingly endless water supply. And they irrigate the golf course using copious amounts of water, because that's what's required to get that ryegrass to germinate, grow, and we get the beautiful emerald green carpet that is Augusta when the US Masters are on. And it looks absolutely incredible. TV, unfortunately, has created a false expectation of what a golf course should look like. A lot of greenkeepers and myself, we nearly curse what television and viewing some of the biggest tournaments around the world has done to what our local club is expected by its members in terms of presentation. But let's take the top level. Augusta have nearly always been the premier club in terms of innovation for greenkeeping. They've got heated greens, for example. They've got sub-air where it draws the moisture out of the soil, so it grows a little bit better, less disease pressure. You can deal with humidity issues. It's endless. It's a rabbit hole if you wanted to go down it, and there's a lot you could find out about it. But they've been innovators, as you would expect, the best in the world, arguably. But that, in my opinion, is probably not the most environmentally conscious way to manage a golf course. Certainly in Australia, a lot of things in other parts of the world don't translate to Australia. We're one of the driest continents on the planet, apart from Antarctica. And it's really difficult in a lot of areas of Australia where we have golf courses to maintain them to a TV expectation. That's what people expect all the time. But it's 4 seasons in a year, guys. You've got to remember that, and those 4 seasons aren't the same every year. There's variability. So you have to understand that even though we have irrigation on golf courses and different types of it, and some have more and some have less, that the seasons will still dictate what you can and can't do to maintain a golf course. So Augusta is the top end of the spectrum that has water. A lot of the desert courses in the States as well, in Nevada, you'll find in the desert tracks around Las Vegas have incredible, what seems like endless water supplies. Shadow Creek was on TV the other day, and you see this incredible oasis. Again, in my opinion, probably not the best way to present a golf course. I've been fortunate enough to play a golf course, so Alice Springs in the middle of Australia. There's the new Kalgoorlie golf course in WA that's a green oasis on the fairways. Outside the fairways is dust. But you look at Shadow Creek, it's green from fence to fence. So I think you need to tailor something to the region. You want a golf course to reflect the space. And if it's a desert, it's obviously very difficult. But you still want it to somewhat reflect that landscape, in my opinion. And other areas around Australia that have lesser rainfall will probably have a drier golf course throughout different times of the year than other areas with high rainfall. You go to northern Queensland, for example, have copious amounts of rain in summer, but sometimes they'll have drier years. Generally speaking, they have good rainfall. Down in the eastern parts of New South Wales, there's usually good rainfall. There's a lot of concentration of golf courses along the east coast, right on the edges within, the 50 kilometres of the coast to get good rainfall. You go west of the Blue Mountains and it's the opposite. Still golf courses out there, but they do struggle a lot more with water. So irrigation has a direct relationship to the presentation of golf courses, direct results. We can't always fight Mother Nature. She can be really, really harsh, like was last year. Most golf courses look shit outside the greens because there was not enough water to put out. Dam storage isn't large enough. There's not enough water to put out. And you should be environmentally conscious of how you're going about that. So I think it's good for courses to consider where their irrigation goes, how much of their golf course is covered, how much water should they be using throughout the year, and then overall, it's not necessarily an annual allocation. It's a cyclical allocation between, La Nina events, for example, 7 to 10 year cycles that I've talked about with this La Nina. When you get your dams topped up, the subterranean water levels are topped up through water flows and infiltration of this high rainfall. that builds up water tables and so on. There is a lot more to consider when it comes to irrigation. It's not just where you can throw the water to, it's where you're getting the water from. Now, there's golf courses in Sydney which don't have any on-site natural runoff water supply or even bore water supply. They use town potable water, town water supply. Now, some of them have moved away from that. You've got places like, the top end of town, like a Pennant Hills Golf Club in the western suburbs of Sydney, that used to use potable water and now uses recycled water. Castle Hill Golf Club, another one that uses recycled water. So Pennant Hills is an innovator in being one of the first golf courses in the country to have an on-site sewage treatment plant that treats water to Class A+, which means it's better than the drinking water that comes out of your tap. And it's an on-site treatment plant. It's quite incredible. These are some of the innovations that golf courses have had to go down the path of to deliver presentation. Now, a place like Pennant Hills, their membership expect that the golf course is going to look absolutely immaculate, akin to, I suppose their goal is to be perfectly maintained green year round, and they do a bloody good job of it. Is that right or wrong environmentally? Well, that's up for anyone can commentate on that. I think using recycled water is a pretty bloody good way of doing it if you're going to use a good amount of water to fight Mother Nature. I think it's the best and probably the only way to fight Mother Nature, to put out high volumes of water is, environmentally, probably only to use recycled water, because it's such a good water supply to use because it's seemingly endless. It does cost a lot of money, no doubt. And it cost them a lot of money to build that treatment plant on site at Pennant Hills. But your golf course should fit in with the environment. I know we had in the Blue Mountains, usually high rainfall. When there were dry years, Waterfalls weren't flowing off the cliffs. And subsequent to that, the golf course, we struggled. We could only water around the greens. I look at places. So we've got the top end at Augusta. I go back to Augusta, oversow that course with ryegrass, water from wall to wall, green from fence to fence, and immaculate. Incredibly, ridiculously large amounts of water used to do that. Then you have a place like Royal Adelaide in South Australia. Now, I got to visit Royal Adelaide last year. Nathan Bennett, superintendent there, was kind enough to give me his time and show me around Royal Adelaide, and I was blown away by how amazing. I probably, as incredible as Royal Melbourne is, and I've said this before about Royal Adelaide, it's often left out of the conversation for some reason when we talk about the best golf courses in the country. I think we keep Royal Melbourne there all the time, and we get the Cape Wickhams, the Ocean Dunes, the Barn Bugles all jump up, the Ellistons of the world. But Royal Adelaide for me is a special golf course that I think could probably really be higher in the top end, possibly the top single figures, and probably mainly for me, its real reason is the beauty with which it sits in the natural landscape. If anyone's ever travelled to South Australia and some of the arid region, well, South Australia is the driest state in Australia, so it's nearly all arid. But if you've been there and you've seen the landscape, Royal Adelaide really does epitomise the South Australian landscape. So much so, not just in what's around the sides of the golf holes themselves and the way that it sits in the natural landscape, but it's the tones and the colours and the textures. It's just a quintessential Australian golf course, and quite possibly, I think, because of that, it could be the best example of an Australian golf course because of its arid surroundings outside those whole corridors and the way that it sits. It really does epitomise Australia. When you think of it, the dry continent that is Australia and a lot of the dry areas of the country, Royal Adelaide, to me, it really is Australia. If ever there was a golf course that you could say was Australia, it's Royal Adelaide. I'm sorry, it might go against a lot of what people suggest, but really, that's what I think when I saw it in person for the first time, and I could walk those fairways without hitting a golf ball for days and be amazed by its location. So Nathan and his team are custodians of the land, and I've said this before when I talked to Richard Forsyth at Royal Melbourne. The superintendents and director of courses are custodians of that space. Golf clubs are custodians of the land that the golf courses are on. So at Royal Adelaide, back to Royal Adelaide, Nathan was telling me about how they have what we call hard edge irrigation. So they've got full golf course irrigation. They hold Australian Open tournaments. They've held in the past and the ladies tournaments and so on. Some of the highest profile tournaments in Australia have been hosted by Royal Adelaide. Now, with that hard edge irrigation that they have, what that means is that the irrigation water is distributed only to the areas of mown turf and maintained turf. And they've decided what those areas are and what that space is. But effectively, you've got your greens and your surrounds, you've got your tees. When it comes to the holes themselves, the hole corridors, it's basically just outside, or it's the fairway edge, and the water is distributed in. They're not 360-degree thrown irrigation heads where the water throws out into the rough. So if they have a drier year than normal in Adelaide, their rough doesn't just burn off, but they've literally got sand outside their fairways. It's not a desert course, but it's pretty bloody close. And you get in under the shrubbery and stuff. It's just rubbish and garbage and sand and thin, spindly vegetation. It's not grass as such. So their irrigation is concentrated to the closely mown portions of the golf course, which is where most of the golf is played, certainly in tournament level. But their membership as well, if you hit outside that, that's part of the natural landscape. That's why I say they're custodians of the landscape. And that's what I love about Royal Adelaide. So their irrigation water is utilised in what they would consider the most efficient way possible by not wasting it on areas that are out of high concentration for maintenance and high presentation areas. And that's a different way of distributing water for course irrigation. So they've got full course irrigation, but they don't water the full fence-to-fence parts of the land. They keep those natural areas as natural as possible. So if it's dry, it's dry. If they have a wet year, they have a wet year, and they maintain it as such. But being the driest state in the country, it's going to be pretty hard to fight Mother Nature. They just say, we're going to keep these out of high maintenance areas natural, and the cycles of the years and the rainfalls will dictate how that's presented. But we're going to maintain these high intensity areas of closely mown grass. We're going to maintain to the best of our ability, and we'll distribute water through that so we can do that. And when you go to Royal Adelaide and look at it, it's an incredible space to walk, to look at. Some people catch the train and go straight through the middle on their way to the beach at Glenelg, and we'll see the golf course from the train. It's a unique feature of Royal Adelaide as well. But that's a different way of doing it. So you have so many different ways of having water distributed around golf courses. Some are manual with handheld hoses and sprinklers and handheld nozzles and hand watering. You have the Augustas of the world and the Shadow Creeks of the world that are fence to fence, whether it be in average rainfall regions where you can reasonably fight Mother Nature, or desert regions where you can't believe you can fight Mother Nature. You have hard edge irrigation like Royal Adelaide. I'll throw another one at you. When I went down and visited Bonnie Doon and caught up with Superintendent Cameron Smith, Cameron was telling me the course had they were in their last stage of work, so it was a couple of years ago now, I think, not quite. Cameron was telling me that they don't have in-ground sprinklers on the golf course. And I just looked at him like, because I thought Katoomba, where we was pretty much the only course in a reasonably populous area that had no automatic irrigation system. He said, no, we don't have that. We have handheld hoses, and it's labour intensive. So our staff go out every day or whatever they need to, and we hand water the greens and surrounds. And I was gobsmacked. I couldn't believe it. So that's how they go about maintaining their greens in their spaces. And Bonnie Doon is a great golf course. It's a great Sydney golf course. Recently, finally, fully redesigned and built by the redesign has finally been envisaged by the club, and that was done by OCCM at the time. And the design is fantastic. Great golf course to play in Sydney. One of the top end courses you'll play. And again, a different way of doing it. If you don't have an automatic irrigation system, it's labour intensive. You have to have people on the ground to be able to water your golf course. At Katoomba, we had a staff of 4 in the good times, 2 in the bad times, and we had about 6 in the best times. On average, we worked around 4 greenkeepers, and when we were in water restrictions, because we used town supply water and we had a small portion of the golf course that was using bore water, and we had to have volunteer members come out and help us water the greens when we couldn't use sprinklers because of water restrictions. So there's so many and very different ways of doing it. But course irrigation, if you don't have course irrigation, it doesn't mean you don't have a good golf course. If you don't, look at the British golf courses. When they have dry years, they're on the coast, links land, sandy based, water drains super quickly. If they have a dry year, they can't fight it. We've seen some of the images of the British Opens of the years gone by where it's just barely, it's got green patches instead of brown patches for fairways. You know, they get incredible amounts of run on their golf courses with the dry fairways and a dry course set up and firm greens and all. But you know what? That's part of golf. That's part of the cycle of maintaining a golf course. And I think more golf courses should present themselves in that way. And we shouldn't lower our standards, we shouldn't lower our expectations of how a golf course is presented. We should become more knowledgeable in understanding how a golf course should be presented. Now, they're two very different things. And I think for an average golfer who plays week in, week out, that is a regular on a golf course, that loves their sport, loves their game, loves their club, and loves the courses that they visit, if a golf course is not green from fence to fence, if the fairways have green patches on them and not brown patches, so if they're mostly brown with green bits, that just means it's a dry year. You can still present a good golf course, well and truly, absolutely. And it's been shown on TV in the British Opens that you can do that. There's no doubt about it. But we need to understand that different golf courses will present differently. And by that, I mean not green from fence to fence. They'll be presented differently in different times of the year and in different regions of the country of Australia and indeed the world. But we need to get our heads around that, because environmentally and in turn financially, it's so much better to maintain a golf course that way. Golf courses will be able to be maintained for longer. Clubs will be able to be in existence financially for longer. They'll be able to have less inputs and less financial inputs, be it labour, be it infrastructure, be it consumables, be it water, to maintain their golf course than if it was a high-use green year-round golf course. We need to get our heads around that the beauty of playing golf in North Queensland, where they get high rainfall throughout the summer, means the course is going to be green. If you go down to Victoria and they're having a dry summer, the golf courses are going to be more brown than they are green, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You just got to play different golf, a different style of golf. Your game should adjust to the different places that you play golf, and in turn, as the seasons and the years change at your home club, if you're in, the Mornington Peninsula of Melbourne, that if it's a dry year, you're going to have more run out in your golf course. If it's a wet year, you're going to have less run, but it's going to be greener naturally. No inputs required, less inputs required. We don't need money to buy water. We don't need money to build irrigation infrastructure where you don't really need it. Look at Royal Adelaide. And I promise you, if you look at Royal Adelaide, you will change your minds because they do it so well. It's about understanding the landscape with which the golf course sits and being custodians of the landscape. And that's what's important. Golf courses are meant to fit in to where they are in existence. And that's the best way and the most ecologically sustainable way for golf courses to exist into the future. I hope that's given you a bit more of an insight on what you'll come across throughout the years. And I've said that we're in a La Nina year, so go and enjoy the green. Go and enjoy the greenery in Australia, wherever you're playing. But know that in 3 or 4 years' time, it's going to go back to being more brown than green. I enjoy those changes. And as a greenkeeper and superintendent, I enjoyed those challenges. Sometimes you want to go and have a little cry in the corner because it's so difficult to try and maintain a golf course. But the reason why is because you have people barking at you saying you should be able to do a better job. Like I said, I think it's important that we don't lower our standards and expectations of how a golf course is presented, but rather we increase our knowledge base and understand how a golf course is presented. And I really think that that's going to change how you look at the golf courses you play in. And you'll also appreciate it, and you'll appreciate your game better, your round of golf better, the way that you play that golf course better, because the presentation of a golf course in its environment is what makes the game itself challenging on that course to boot, because you can have a different golf course in winter that you can in summer. And you can play it a totally different way from 2020 to 2021. So that's the Greenkeeper Shed, guys. I hope it gives you a little bit more information. And thanks again for listening into it. And that is yet another wrap of the Golf and Greenkeeper podcast. Thank you so much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed my golf chat with Ross Flanagan. I really love catching up with Roscoe. He's got a wonderful mind and a wonderful, great, wide insight into the world of golf in Australia. And I hope you got a few little bits and pieces out of the news in Walking the Fairways, and certainly also out of the Greenkeeper Shed talking about irrigation. So thanks again coming on for a ride. I hope you enjoyed the listen. Please pass on the podcast to any of your friends, family, people that you know of. Tell them to have a listen in. I hope they get a little bit of knowledge out of it as well. Have a comment, send me a message. Happy to chat away. I've been chatting to a few of my followers and a few listeners on Instagram and Facebook. So please, if you've got anything you want to talk about, let me know. Send me some of your photos of the courses that you've been playing, because I love hearing where you've been, what you've been up to, how you've been traveling in COVID. It's really good to see people getting out there, enjoying different golf courses and enjoying the sport of golf again in general. If you want to listen in to Ross Flanagan, I do thank Ross again for his time chatting. Go to the My Love of Golf podcast and have a listen in to Roscoe and his many guests that he has. Feel free to also go to his other ones, obviously being the Mental Mastery podcast with Jamie Glazier or Golf Rules Questions. There's just Roscoe is in everything, which is great to see. And like I said, he's got a good knowledge base. So thanks again for listening, guys. Please pass the podcast around however you feel free. And I look forward to you joining me next time. And I appreciate your company as always. You hit them clean and we'll keep them green. Go out there and enjoy your golf, guys.